You check your portfolio after a bad trade. Your stomach drops. That specific, sick feeling of being wrong about money, you probably think it's just stress. But the real reason it hits so hard traces back to 1 week in November 1982, when the man who saw a crash coming better than almost anyone alive went on national television and declared his own downfall. His name was Ray Dalio, and by 1982, his bearish bets already looked brilliant. Mexico had just defaulted on its debt. U.S. banks had lent nearly 2.5 times their own capital to countries just as fragile. Dalio saw it building before almost anyone. Congress invited him to testify. Then he was booked as the featured guest on Wall Street Week, the must-watch show for anyone who cared about markets. And there, with the whole investing world watching, he said something he still can't take back. There would be no soft landing, and he could say it with absolute certainty because he understood how markets worked. He put the odds of a depression at 75%. Here's what actually happened. The Federal Reserve eased. Money fled the troubled countries and poured into the United States. The dollar climbed. Inflation fell while growth accelerated. And the stock market launched into what became an 18-year, record-breaking bull run. The opposite of everything Dalio had just told America to expect on television. He was dead wrong publicly, permanently on tape. And the cost wasn't just embarrassment. It was almost everything. Bridgewater, 8 years of his life's work, collapsed. He had to let his employees go, one at a time, until only he and one partner remained. That partner's family eventually packed up and moved back to Oklahoma, in his words, with tears from everyone. Dalio borrowed $4,000 from his own father. He sold the family's second car. He had a wife and 2 young children, and a company with a headcount of 1. Here's the detail that should stop you cold. He was standing at the exact fork every person eventually reaches with money. Put on a tie, take a safe job, and never risk being that wrong again. Or rebuild, knowing you might be wrong just as loudly the next time. He rebuilt, but not the same way. Instead of trusting his own certainty, he started asking a different question. Not am I right, but how do I know I'm right? He began writing down every mistake as an explicit, testable rule, instead of just feeling bad about it and moving on. He called the formula pain plus reflection equals progress, the idea that pain is simply the signal that a lesson is available, and reflection is how you actually collect it. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky later showed that losses hurt roughly twice as much as equivalent gains feel good, which is exactly why most people run from the pain of being wrong instead of mining it. Dalio did the opposite. He treated his worst public failure like a data point instead of a wound. He also went back further, to a moment 11 years earlier that he'd almost ignored. In August 1971, as a young clerk on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, he watched President Nixon take the United States off the gold standard. He expected panic. Instead, stocks jumped the very next morning. Confused, he dug into history and found the identical pattern after Franklin Roosevelt broke the gold link back in 1933. His conclusion became his method for the rest of his life. What shocks you is usually only shocking because it hasn't happened in your lifetime. Somewhere in history, it already has. He started calling market surprises another one of those, and asking which one and what happened the other times it played out. That single habit, forged from a public humiliation, is why decades later Bridgewater became the largest hedge fund on earth. And it's why in 2008, while most of the industry was on fire, Dalio's fund navigated the crisis profitably, because by then he wasn't trusting his gut. He was trusting a system built from his own worst mistake. So here's the question worth sitting with. What's the financial mistake you're still just feeling bad about, instead of turning into a rule? Maybe it's a stock you sold too early out of panic. Maybe it's a purchase you still wince at. Most people store these moments as private shame and quietly hope to never repeat them through willpower alone. Dalio's whole empire says willpower isn't the mechanism. A written rule is, try this tonight. Take one financial regret, just one, and write down in a single sentence the rule that would have prevented it. Not the feeling, the rule. That's the entire method that turned a man with a head count of 1 into the founder of the world's largest hedge fund. You checked your portfolio after a bad trade, and your stomach dropped. Now you know that feeling isn't something to bury. It's raw material if you're willing to write down what it's trying to teach you. If this video showed you a blind spot, share it with one person who needs to see it too. A new Money Goggles video every week.